Your sister is very upset right now, my mother said, her voice irritated through the phone. This is not the time to be dramatic. I stared at the hospital ceiling while nurses adjusted the monitors beside my bed. I'm being taken into surgery in 10 minutes, I said quietly. She's crying because you criticized her living room, Mom replied. Can this wait? Hi everyone, my name is Marissa. The anesthesiologist was preparing the four beside me when I realized something strange. My mother wasn't coming. I just wanted to hear your voice before they start, I said. Mom sighed heavily. You're an adult. You'll be fine. I have to deal with your sister right now. The line went dead. The nurse noticed my expression. Family on the way? She asked gently. No, I answered, because in that moment I understood something important. My surgery was critical, but my sister's home decor argument apparently ranked higher on the family priority list. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. Instead, I picked up my phone and called someone else. My surgery starts in a few minutes, I told my lawyer calmly. If I wake up, meet me in the ICU tomorrow. There was a pause. Understood, he replied. And that was the moment everything quietly changed. The surgery lasted 6 hours. I remember almost none of it. Just the cold operating room lights and the anesthesiologist telling me to breathe slowly while the medication moved through the four. When I woke up, the world felt distant. Machines hummed around my bed. A steady rhythm of monitors echoed through the ICU. A nurse noticed my eyes open. Welcome back, Marissa, she said gently. Did it work? I whispered. It went very well. Relief should have been the loudest emotion in that moment. Instead, it was clarity. My phone sat on the small tray beside the bed. No missed calls. No messages. Not from my mother. Not from my father. Not even from my sister. The nurse adjusted my four and smiled kindly. Family usually comes later in the day, she said. Sometimes they just need time. I didn't correct her. Instead, I opened my phone and typed one message to my lawyer. I'm awake. The reply came almost instantly. I'm on my way to the hospital. I set the phone down and stared at the ceiling again. My mother still hadn't called, but something else had already begun. Because the legal paperwork we discussed before surgery had one purpose: to make sure my life decisions were no longer controlled by people who ignored them. My lawyer arrived that afternoon. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet knock on the ICU door and a leather folder under his arm. How are you feeling? He asked. Sore, I admitted. That's expected. He pulled a chair beside my bed and opened the folder. I brought the documents you requested. 3 months earlier, when my health first started declining, I had prepared something most people my age avoid thinking about. Power of attorney, medical authority, financial control. Until that morning, my mother had been listed as my emergency decision maker. Not because she deserved it, because I assumed she would show up. My lawyer slid the papers onto the tray table. Are you certain about the changes? He asked quietly. Yes. He handed me the pen carefully, so I wouldn't strain the 4-line in my arm. One signature removed my mother's authority over my medical care. Another removed her access to my accounts. The third transferred everything to the only person who had shown up that day. Not family. My lawyer. Just as I finished signing, my phone buzzed.
Mom.
I answered. Why didn't you tell me the surgery was today? She demanded. I looked at the signed paperwork. I did. You mentioned something earlier, my mom said quickly, but your sister was very upset. I leaned slightly against the hospital pillows, careful not to disturb the stitches across my chest. I called you from the operating room, I said calmly. Well, I thought you were exaggerating, she replied. Exaggerating. The words sat quietly between us. When are you getting discharged? She asked. Not for a few days. Oh, she said. Your sister and I might come by later this week.
Might.
I glanced at the folder still open on the tray beside me. You don't need to, I replied. What's that supposed to mean? She asked sharply. It means I've handled everything already. What, everything? My medical decisions. There was a pause. You're being dramatic again, she said. I'm being practical. My lawyer quietly gathered the signed papers while I spoke. What practical decision? She asked. The one where you're no longer responsible for my care. Silence filled the line. What are you talking about? I changed my medical authority this afternoon, I said calmly. You can't just remove your own mother. I watched my lawyer slide the documents back into his folder. Yes, I replied softly. I can. You did what? My mother snapped. Her voice was louder now, the kind she used when she expected the room to rearrange itself around her anger. I reassigned medical authority, I said calmly. You had no right to do that. I almost smiled. I actually had every right. My lawyer stood quietly near the window, giving me space but listening carefully. You're punishing me, my mom said. No, I replied. I'm protecting myself. For what? She demanded. I wasn't even there yet. Exactly. I thought about the operating room doors closing while she debated throw pillows with my sister. You didn't answer when I called, I said. I was dealing with your sister, she insisted. You know how emotional she gets. I let the sentence settle. Mom, I said slowly. I was about to go under anesthesia. You survived, she replied quickly. The room became very quiet. My lawyer looked up from his folder. Not surprised. Just observing. I did. I agreed. And that gave me time to think. Think about what? She asked. About who actually shows up when it matters. Another pause. Fine, she said sharply. When can we visit? I looked at the heart monitor beside my bed. You can't. What do you mean we can't? I said calmly. You're no longer listed as family contact. You can't remove your own mother, she said again, but the certainty had faded. I already did. My lawyer quietly slid a second document across the tray. This one confirms the hospital records update, he said. I signed it slowly. My mother was still talking. You're being irrational. Hospitals always call family. This one won't, I replied. Why? Because you're not listed anymore. Silence. Not the angry silence from earlier. A confused one. What did you do? She asked finally. I assigned medical authority to someone who answers the phone. My lawyer didn't react, but I saw him glance briefly toward the window. You chose a stranger over your own mother? She said sharply. He's not a stranger, I replied. He's reliable. That seemed to offend her more. This is ridiculous. When I arrive, we'll fix it. You can come to the hospital, I said calmly. But you'll check in like every other visitor. What does that mean? It means you won't be making decisions. The heart monitor beside my bed continued its steady rhythm. You're overreacting, she said again. I looked down at the bandage across my chest. No, I replied quietly. I'm reorganizing. My mother arrived the next afternoon. Not quietly. She walked into the ICU waiting area already irritated, like the hospital had inconvenienced her personally. The nurse stopped her at the desk. Are you listed as family contact for Marissa Collins? She asked. Yes, I'm her mother. The nurse checked the screen. I'm sorry, ma'am. You're listed as a visitor. My mother blinked. That's incorrect. It was updated yesterday. I watched the entire conversation through the small glass panel beside my room door. My lawyer stood beside me, arms folded. She's not authorized for medical decisions, the nurse continued politely. My mother's voice sharpened. I am her mother. Yes, ma'am, the nurse replied calmly, but not her medical proxy. The words landed harder than I expected. Mom turned and finally saw me watching from inside the room. Her expression changed instantly. Shock. Anger. Then disbelief. She stepped inside. What did you do? She demanded. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even sit up straighter. I made sure the person responsible for my life answers when I call. Her eyes moved briefly toward my lawyer. You replaced me with him? I nodded once. Yes. And for the first time in my life, she looked like she had no control left. She stood beside the hospital bed for a long moment, trying to recover the authority she'd always carried. You're being dramatic, my mother said finally. I almost expected that sentence. I was about to go into surgery. I replied quietly. I called you from the operating room. You made it sound like an emergency. It was. She folded her arms. Your sister was in tears. I looked at her carefully. About a sofa. That's not the point. It finally was. The nurse stepped inside briefly to check my monitor, then left again, closing the door softly behind her. My mother glanced around the ICU room, uncomfortable in a place she hadn't expected to be powerless. "You should have waited for me," she said. "I did." Silence followed. "Your lawyer shouldn't be making family decisions," she added. "He isn't," I said calmly. "I am." The difference seemed to register slowly. Because this wasn't punishment. It was structure. "You'll regret cutting family out," she warned. I looked down at the faint scar beneath the bandage on my chest. "No," I replied. "I'll regret ignoring reality." My heart monitor continued its steady rhythm beside the bed. Stronger than her authority. Stronger than her absence. Stronger than her excuses.